Um,
with regards to this, everybody, please put your hands together for the fantastic Terry Garde.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I just don't want to share them immediately. Let me just come back to stop sharing for the moment. And anyway, we've seen that they are working, and that's what's important. So my name's Terry Garde. I grew up in Zimbabwe and studied mining engineering in South Africa, went back and worked in the industry there for a few decades after independence, and hung in there in the mining industry. And then eventually found that there was a new phenomenon occurring in Zimbabwe, which has now come to be known as artisanal mining. But in those days, it really was just called something like riverbed mining. And it became something that was of interest to the mining companies, but it didn't take off or didn't explode in the way it has now, and throughout the whole world. But I started to be interested in the folk who were doing artisanal mining, particularly on the chrome side, because I headed up a big chrome mining and smelting company at one point, the third largest in Zimbabwe, and then that's when I got really interested on the chrome artisanal mining side and learning what was going on and things. So that's was a seed interest into what then I went all the way through and eventually did a PhD in looking at artisanal mining, particularly gold mining in Kenya. So I've had an opportunity to really think through what artisanal gold mining is all about. And so my little talk is based on the three words that have been given to us: resilience, responsibility, and risk in artisanal gold mining. Each of these three words is invariably interpreted differently by the various stakeholders, or in the words of this conference, beholders, who are involved in artisanal gold mining. I note three groups of beholders, as firstly the miners themselves, secondly the accountable authorities, and thirdly campaigners or outside agencies such as myself who are involved in the sector. The last group are neither miners nor any of the state actors who are accountable within their country for the impacts of artisanal gold mining. There is a fourth group, a sort of dark side, and I'll come back to them later on in the talk. But the three I'm talking about are those that are above the line and who have a possible impact in change. Despite their differences, the differences in our roles, in our approaches, and in the way we understand resilience, responsibility, and risk, we have a common desire for change, for improving the situation, for developing the sector. From my experience, I've noticed two approaches to changes in mining. One is for organizational behavior, and the other is for personal change. Regarding organizations or institutions, they often start with a new policy or new principles that are established, or even a proclamation. For example, Abraham Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation in 1863. These are usually followed by a second step, the issuing of procedures, laws, regulations, standards, and so on, to take such declarations of intent towards reality. Thirdly, operating procedures, safe practices, and the like are written into competency manuals or handbooks and taught in classrooms, training centers, mock mines, or actually on the job. Then fourthly, following the old adage that what gets measured gets done, what does not get measured does not get done, efforts towards implementing the standards are typically audited, inspected, or compliance is measured in some way or another, often by an outside party. All of this, it is hoped, will lead to a change in the culture of an organization or institution. And I witnessed this when I was the general manager of a large mine in Zimbabwe, and we set out to improve our health, safety, and environmental record. It took a few years, but after we worked through an approach exactly as I've outlined, the changes became part of our organizational culture. That's the sort of top-down approach. But then looking at the personal side of things, and artisanal mining is very much about individuals. Even Ludovine mentioned earlier the gold panna in a river. And so personal behavior, unlike organizational behavior, is a very real emphasis in artisanal mining. It's something that must be done in order to change behavior. It's not just about the organization at all. It really is, the individual is very important in this situation. And an example of this is laid out in a book called The Wheel of Change, a model for personal transformation by Robert Gass. This model starts with motivation within the heart or mind of the individual and is followed by change in the behavior, habits, or choices we make. The third change is similar to the step above and requires education or training, even if self-taught, in the new competencies, skills, and talents required to turn one's vision, dreams, or hopes into practice. Finally, there needs to be a structural change in our environment out there, in our external life, that will allow us the opportunity to realize our personal transformation. Otherwise, it is simply not sustainable. These three areas of change in our heart, mind, in our new behaviors, and in the environment need to reinforce each other, hence the name, the Wheel of Change. Without them working in tandem, personal change is likely to falter or become unsustainable. As I mentioned, there are, broadly speaking, three groups of people who are the beholders of risk, responsibility, and resilience in artisanal gold mining. I am in one group, the outsider, with no power to create large-scale organizational or structural change, but I can still be an agent of small, low-risk changes. And there is a device, a piece of equipment that I've been involved with for a number of years called a gold catcher, which is a spinning concentrator that replaces the drudgery and dirty work of sluicing, which is part of artisanal gold mining. I was instrumental in getting the first one into the Busia gold region of eastern Uganda, and the device, manufactured by a company in Johannesburg, has sold well throughout Africa, especially in places like Ghana. There, test work has shown it to be efficient in gold recoveries. It reduces the subsequent use of mercury in extracting gold particles and saves labor. It is, however, quite a large piece of equipment. It requires a high tonnage throughput and a large quantity of water, even if that water is recycled from a nearby reservoir. But now this company, APT, have developed a mini gold catcher, and I'm now going to see if I can go back to my slide and show it to you along with other pieces of equipment. So let me see if I can now share screen, if I can find this. And let's go on to this slide here. And we'll go from the beginning. There we are. So here is a picture of one of my friends and the developer of this equipment. And it's brand new. It's just arrived in Harare last week. And there you can see the gold catcher in the middle of the picture, the orange cylindrical device. To the left, in my picture at least, there is this crusher. It's called an impactor. It's to break the rock from underground into smaller pieces. And then from there, it gets fed into the gold catcher, which you can see through the yellow tube. And then, although it hasn't been assembled properly, that then feeds into the sluice that you can see here. This is a sluice box. And the whole system is integrated and designed to work together. And as you can see, I mean, who can see mining equipment, which is usually huge pieces of equipment that are vast consumers of energy. And here you can have a person to give you a sense of scale as to how small this equipment really is and how appropriate it is for individual miners. Let me go to the final slide. And what's really exciting for me is that all this equipment that you've seen in the previous slide, along with a generator and a pump, can all be fitted onto the back of a trailer and towed to a mining site. And at last I can see the right kind of level of appropriate equipment being manufactured for artisanal miners, allowing them to move in the first steps towards a mercury-free processing, which this is designed to go mercury-free, to make it robust, to make it appropriate, and to make it affordable. That's very important. Miners do not like risk at all. And so for them, let me stop sharing now. For them, anything that reduces risk is absolutely critical. And that's part of the title of our conversation this week. So all the equipment can then be moved to demonstrate the system to miners, and hopefully within the next 2 weeks, we'll be moving the equipment around Harare to mining sites. We hope then that either groups of miners or other local enterprises will buy the system for their own use, or to hire it out. By paying to hire the service, such a system reduces the risks to the miners of purchasing and owning the equipment for themselves. And if I can get the right people involved, and we're busy working towards this, being mobile will allow us to promote personal practices with the miners, health and safety practices, environmental protection practices, such as the not using mercury. And once we've got further credibility as being the kind of the good guys in the situation, we hope they'll allow us underground and help them with the safety of underground mining, and help the whole thing to become a bit more sustainable. Now, what interests me and why I'm keen on this is that all this, I think, is sustainable without major restructuring of the environment. We can work with this wheel of change approach. We can stimulate motivation by demonstrating valid alternatives in mining and processing to miners, for whom seeing is believing. Once motivated, the miners themselves, we hope, will want to be trained to become more competent in the use of these methods and equipment. Hopefully, if truly appropriate, they will want to own and operate the technology for themselves. And this is a very sustainable step towards responsible mining. But what would really help is that, as well as learning new competencies, the miners get faith in a bigger picture. A faith beyond being simply caught up in their hand-to-mouth existence. And this is where the dark side comes in now, beyond being caught up in a world of illegality, of crime, of corruption, a culture that so often surrounds them. And without seeing change in their livelihood environment, it's hard to promote responsible mining that will truly transform their world. And so therefore, it's up to those stakeholders who can change the operating structure, the environmental culture, to do so, along the lines that I've proposed above, in terms of principles, standards, measures, and getting things done. Here is where changing structures in their environment can help. And there's a number of NGOs, there's a number of government departments that are trying to help with formalization, to help with markets, to help with financing, to enable gender, labor, and human rights. And so what I would really hope is that the two approaches can meet. The bottom-up approach, and I represent Paul Collier's The Bottom Billions in this talk and with what I'm trying to do, and the top-down approach, that is the one that most people talk about, especially at a conference like this. But changes towards resilience, towards responsible mining, and towards de-risking the consequences can be implemented in artisanal gold mining, even though the meaning of these words may not be commonly understood, as Ludovine pointed out earlier. I'm not worried, because seeing is believing. Having this kind of equipment to on show to the eyes of the beholders, allowing them to see the possibilities for themselves, is the gateway to sustainable change. So, thanks very much for allowing me to share these thoughts this afternoon, Sarah.
Absolute pleasure, Terry. Thank you so much. And round of applause from all of us here who've been very much enjoying listening to you. Terry, we've got time for a couple of questions. And the first one has come in the chat. And the question is, from your experience, how affordable is this equipment to artisanal and small-scale miners? In other words, how much?
Okay. So the equipment as it stands now, including the trailer, would be about $5,000 US. That is tiny in mining terms, proper mining, real mining, large scale mining, medium scale mining. It's tiny. But for an artisanal miner, that's still quite a lot of money. However, I know that they themselves are already buying pumps, they're buying compressors, they're buying jackhammers, they're buying hoists, they're putting in rope-assisted hoist for pulling sacks out of the ground, they're putting in vertical shafts with hoists. And so that level of money is quite high compared to the gold panner that we were talking about earlier. But it's not a lot of money for hard rock mining cooperatives and other groups of miners. And that's why I do believe now that we're getting down to the level where we are making things affordable.
And Terry, in terms of I guess the development of the gold catcher and getting everything off the ground, we've got a question here asking, where did that seed capital, where did that funding come from? Was it yourselves just going, hang on a second, this is something that we can do to contribute to the management of this risk, or where did that come from?
So the initial money's all come out of charity. So I've been a very busy man appealing for funds here and there, wherever I can find it. So that's part of it. The development of the mini gold catcher came really by me putting pressure on the company APT in Johannesburg, having brought the first one into East Africa. That was all charity money raised through NGOs who are involved in the sector. And so, but when because of me being incessantly putting pressure on them for 10 years, saying, come on, guys, I'm sure you can make a smaller version. I'm sure you can make a smaller version. They put in their own money as a company to develop the smaller mini gold catcher. And of course, they're waiting with bated breath now to see whether or not my hopes of more sales will be realized.
Well, we hope so. And final question before we move on to our next speaker. And again, it's another money one. So people are very interested in this from a financial perspective, Terry. And this again comes in from the chat of, do you have a pathway to move from charity to that more impact investment, or could you do with any connections into impact investment?
I would certainly do with more links into impact investment. I have had a couple of conversations with impact investors in Canada and in Britain, but I haven't really been able to seal any of the deals. Right now, they're waiting for me to produce some cash flows, and so I'm busy working with other people, putting spreadsheets together to show that we can generate positive cash flows. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you very, very much, Terry. And there are some more questions and comments coming in the chat, but I'm sure we can leave you to maybe address some of those. Everyone, please put your hands together for the fabulous Terry. Round of applause. Brilliant.